This is Delia again, and I'm reading The Struggle of the Vampire Diaries. This is part 2. There was snow all over her, like a white fur coat. Stiffly, Elena stood leaning heavily on the other girls. They walked her back to Meredith's car. It should have been warmer inside the car, but Elena's nerve endings were coming back to life, making her shake, telling her how cold she really was. Winter is an unforgiving season, she thought, as Meredith drove. "What's going on, Elena?" said Bonnie from the back seat. "What did you think you were doing, running away from school like that? And how could you come out here?" Elena hesitated, then shook her head. She wanted nothing more than to tell Bonnie and Meredith everything, to tell them the whole terrifying story about Stephen and Damon and what had really happened last night to Mr. Tanner, and about after, but she couldn't. Even if they would believe her, it wasn't her secret to tell. "Everyone's out looking for you," Meredith said. "The whole school's upset, and your aunt was nearly frantic." "Sorry," said Elena dully, trying to stop her violent shivering. They turned onto Maple Street and pulled up to her house. Aunt Judith was waiting inside with heated blankets. "I knew if they found you, you'd be half frozen," she said, in a determinedly cheerful voice as she reached for Elena. "Snow on the day after Halloween. I can hardly believe it. Where did you girls find her?" "On Old Creek Road past the bridge," said Meredith. Aunt Judith's thin face lost color. "Near the graveyard? Where the attacks were? Elena, how could you?" Her voice trailed off as she looked at Elena. "We won't say anything more about it right now," she said, trying to regain her cheerful manner. "Let's get you out of those wet clothes." "I have to go back once I'm dry," said Elena. Her brain was working again, and one thing was clear. She hadn't really seen Stephen out there. It had been a dream. Stephen was still missing. "You have to do nothing of the kind," said Robert, Aunt Judith's fiancé. Elena had scarcely noticed him standing off to one side until then. But his tone brooked no argument. "The police are looking for Stephen. You leave them to their job," he said. "The police think he killed Mr. Tanner, but he didn't. You know that, don't you?" As Aunt Judith pulled her sodden outer sweater off, Elena looked from one face to another for help, and they were all the same. "You know he didn't do it," she repeated almost desperately. There was a silence. "Elena," Meredith said at last, "no one wants to think he did it. But, well, it looks bad. His running away like this. He didn't run away. He didn't. He didn't." "Elena, hush," said Aunt Judith. "Don't get yourself worked up. I think you must be getting sick. It was so cold out there, and you got only a few hours of sleep last night." She laid a hand on Elena's cheek. Suddenly, it was all too much for Elena. Nobody believed her, not even her friends and family. At that moment, she felt surrounded by enemies. "I'm not sick," she cried, pulling away, "and I'm not crazy either. Whatever you think, Stephen's didn't run away, and he didn't kill Mr. Tanner. And I don't care if none of you believes me." She stopped, choking. Aunt Judith was fussing around her, hurrying her upstairs, and she let herself be hurried, but she wouldn't go to bed when Aunt Judith suggested. She must be tired. Instead, once she had warmed up, she sat in the living room couch by the fireplace, with blankets heaped around her. The phone rang all afternoon, and she heard Aunt Judith talking to friends and neighbors and the school. She assured all of them that Elena was fine. The tragedy last night had unsettled her a bit, that was all, and she seemed a little feverish, but she'd be good as new after a rest. I'll go to the next chapter, next part.